Hey guys, what's going on? This is your Movie Fix and I'm Tyler. Today I want to be talking about home theater, right? That's something I've always wanted to do. It's been a hobby of mine for about the last 6 years. And if you're really into movies and enjoying them, I really feel like home theater side is important, especially after the last year with movie theaters have been closed down. So I think most people have been trying to find a way, what can I do to enjoy movies more at home? How can I get that better experience? How can I take my setup to the next level? So that's today what I want to talk about are some of my 5 tips for just home theater basics and getting started. And really this is going to be more aimed towards integrating a home theater system, your speakers and your TV in a pretty normal environment like this living room. This is my living room that you probably haven't seen. We're usually doing things over in the theater room, but I wanted to show what you can do in a normal room or a bedroom, something like that. But let's get right into it. Tip number 1, you've really just got to decide where you want to go with your audio and your video. Starting off with video, we're going to be talking about displays. Do you want to go OLED, LED, or projector? There's so many pros and cons of each device, and you got to think of room considerations, where you're at. Are you in a living room space? Is there a lot of light in here, and also cost? So let's take a quick look and break down OLED versus LED, and let's talk about projectors too. So right off the bat, let's get into OLEDs. They've got perfect blacks and contrasts, which you really can't beat them. So what they do is OLED is organic light emitting diodes. It does not stand for, it's not the same as LED, right? It's an entirely different technology. And because of that, they can totally kill the light that's going into a pixel and give you those perfect contrast ratios. And this is something that might be a con, but I don't really think it is. And it gets brought up a lot in the conversation of OLED versus LED. So I want to talk about it, that they don't get as bright as an LED display does. But I think they get plenty bright enough, right? You go to a showroom, you're in Best Buy, you're looking at the TVs that are in there, and it's not really necessary for a TV in your home to get as bright as they do in a showroom floor where they've got, a giant warehouse of these fluorescent lights coming down. If you want that image to stand out, of course you have to max out that brightness and put it in this crazy display mode. The light output that you get from an LED isn't really necessary in a home environment, but if you're in a room where there's a lot of light coming in, ambient light from the sun, from the windows, you may want to go with an LED, but I think for the most part, OLEDs have reached a point where they are at a just fine brightness level for 99% of people. One of the other things is that burn-in used to be an issue on OLED TVs, but that's not really the case anymore. They've got their algorithms in there for when they turn off, they run these cycles. Even with heavy gaming, running it as a computer monitor, you don't really have to worry about that too much with OLED, and the cost is going down on these things. They used to be crazy expensive, $3,000 and $4,000 for like a 55-inch, but they've come down quite a bit. While they are still more pricey for the same size of a TV compared to an LED, it's gone down to an affordable level where you can get a 65-inch quality panel for under $2,000, which is incredible. One of the other things that the OLED has going for it is that it has better off-axis viewing compared to the LED. And what that means is if you have different couch layouts, that image is still going to look great whether you're sitting off to the side or right in front of it. Let's talk about those pros and cons of the LED. First thing going for it is that it has a higher light output. These things can get incredibly bright, up to like 1500 nits compared to an OLED that might be half as bright. But like I said, that brightness may not be necessary for most people. In a normal living room at nighttime, you don't want to be watching a TV with the brightness or like the backlight. You don't max that out. That would be just painful. So the light output may be something you need, but more than likely not. You can also get the same TV that's an LED for the same size. It's going to be a lot cheaper. But because of that cheapness, there's a massive variance in quality among LED TVs. You've got the lower end budget brands like TLC, Vizio, and Hisense. They've been around a while. Some of them, they have a higher end product line, but for the most part, those are meant to be affordable TVs. But you cannot expect that Black Friday special of getting a $300 65-inch TV. It's simply not going to perform as well as if you put the money towards the same quality of a 55-inch LG OLED, that's $1,500. Just, you play the panel lottery with TVs, and what that means is, I've got this here Samsung. The cheaper you go with a TV, the panel lottery gets worse for you, meaning that panel could be great in their demo versions, and all their tests that they did. They picked the best panel they could. But the cheaper the TV is, the more variances that are going to be in the batches that are made, and you could get dead pixels, you could get crazy waves in the images. And that's something you have to consider when you're buying cheap, is you're probably going to get what you pay for, and there is a lot of that with LED. And then directly compared to the OLED, it does have pretty poor off-axis viewing, but if you just have one row of seating that's right in front of the TV, that's not really something you have to worry about. So I don't want to just poo-poo all over LED TVs, because there are quality ones. You know, some of the Samsung higher end ones are really great, but if I was gonna buy another LED, if I had to, I would definitely go with Sony or LG. And then we're gonna briefly talk about projectors, because you can make a projector work in a living room environment, but it takes a lot more steps, right? So there are $300 projectors. Those aren't gonna be worth your time. That's not something you even want to consider. And projectors can be expensive. You're looking at $1,000 to $2,000 just to get something that's pretty good, right? It's a pretty big price range, but you're looking at a device that can give you an 80-inch screen up to like a 150-inch screen, right? There's a lot more flexibility with the placement and what you can do with the projector. But in order to get the best performance out of a projector, it is very, very room dependent. It doesn't matter if you buy some $10,000 laser projector from JVC. If you put it in a living room like this, I've got all this light coming in from the windows, it's gonna look like shit. That's the bottom line. There's not much you can do, and there's a lot more considerations that have to be met with using a projector, such as what screen you're gonna use, what material you're gonna use, the size, throw distance. That's a whole other ballpark. So that's almost like a con for the projectors, is that you really have to do your homework. You also have to consider the amount of heat that this thing is gonna put out, because a TV runs really cool, but a projector's got a light bulb in there that's real hot. And if you don't have everything set up right, it may be something to consider, is that heat that's gonna come out of this thing. And also, separate sound is mandatory. Most of these things don't have any onboard audio, of course, so you have to have some sort of a sound system, probably surround sound. I don't think many people are pairing up soundbars with projectors. I don't think that'd work too well. And definitely make sure it's good for gaming. That's something you need to consider if you have games in your setup. Same with TVs, but that's really something most TVs are okay at doing right now, is handling latency. That was maybe an issue 10 years ago, but for the most part, every TV handles games pretty well. But projectors, I know that my projector in my movie room, it's totally useless for gaming. I think it has 120 milliseconds of lag. That's awful, and there is no gaming mode. There's nothing you can do, but it's a movie projector. But just be wary of that before you go with a projector, is that you do need to look up if it has a gaming mode and what its latency is for that. Right, so now that we've covered the video side of things, let's break down the audio and compare soundbars to a dedicated home theater system, or even a 2.0, a 2.1, 3.1, what you can do with a receiver versus what you can do with a soundbar. So let's get right to it. Point number one going for the soundbar is that it has proprietary hookups typically, and you have the least amount of flexibility of the two options. So that just means there's not a whole lot of adding on to it. It's not modular. What you buy is what you get. However, they do far exceed TV speakers. And that's one thing I'll give them, is that, you know, we've moved to these flat panel TVs that are like a half-inch thick. You know, just the physics alone of how you're gonna fit a decent sized speaker in that, it's not gonna work. We had better speakers in CRT televisions, right? Because they could put them in the front. And with these flat panel displays now, you put one or two little 3 to 4 inch speakers firing into the back of the wall behind you. So no matter what, those are always going to be bad. I think at a minimum, you should have a sound bar. If you're not gonna go with surround sound, a sound bar is just the minimum that you should be going to enjoy anything that you watch. I don't care if it's sports, television, it is definitely a step up. And it also has the smaller footprint of the two options here. So, you know, you're looking at a 3 to 5 foot bar for the sound. You go and you put it right on top of your entertainment stand, and you're pretty much good to go. You might have a sub that's off to the side. They're typically smaller subwoofers though, but it keeps that footprint nice and small in your living space. What comes with that small footprint is that small subwoofer, which means you're gonna get a very low dynamic range to your sound, meaning there's gonna be not a lot of difference between your lows and your highs. And that's also part of the speakers themselves in a soundbar. They can only do so much. They can only work with so many formats. But that's a big thing to consider. And that's really the big reason why most people end up going with a dedicated speaker system, is to get that incredible dynamic range that you cannot get on a soundbar. And unless you're looking at spending, you know, crazy money like 1 to 2,000 on those just insane sound bars for the sake of simplicity, but at that point, you could have just made a better surround sound system. And then this is one of my biggest problems with the sound bars, is that none of them, I don't care if they say they're 5.1, if they say they're Atmos, none of them are true surround sound. There's a lot of marketing gimmicks that are involved with sound bars. I've seen boxes that say they support Dolby Vision, right? Dolby Vision's a video format that it supports Dolby Atmos. I mean, it may accept a Dolby Atmos file, you know, playing through and decoded, but none of it is real surround sound, right? If you've only got 3 to 5 feet of a sound stage right in front of you, I don't care if it has speakers on the side of it, that's not surround sound. You're basically just getting 3 to 5 speakers put right in front of you. They may be individual, but they're all still right in front of you. Doesn't matter. And that's just one of my problems with more of the marketing side of it. But there's a lot of gimmicky stuff that you go into, and you're paying for that label, for that Dolby label being put on a soundbar. You're paying more for it for really no reason. One of the other things for the soundbar is that it's also cheaper. Typically, you can go out to Best Buy, you can find yourself a $100 to $200 soundbar and be good to go. Plug it in, be done with it, right? But that's not why we're here. We're here to talk about surround sound. So surround sound can be more expensive, but it's modular, right? You can add to it over time, you can upgrade over time, but it does require a receiver. So you want to get yourself a receiver, but those have plenty of pros in of itself, right? It doesn't just decode all your audio. It doesn't give you the option for multiple speakers. It's also an HDMI switcher. If you're a gamer and you have multiple systems like I do, you can have 4 to 8 inputs on one dedicated device. You don't have to buy a separate HDMI switcher or worry about any of that. But with it being modular and being able to upgrade your system over time, you can start with a 2.0 system, which is just going to be 2 main stereo speakers in that format with no subwoofer. You can always add the subwoofer later. You don't have to get, you don't have to go straight to 7.1, 7.2, crazy balls to the wall. You don't have to do that. You can start with 2.0, add a quality subwoofer in later, and then upgrade and get a matching center channel. And then you can go and add your surrounds. But these are things that can be bought over time, and each piece is going to improve your system. One of the other things about the receiver and the speakers is you can fine tune it to be exactly the sound that you want. You can really dial it in and get it as close to reference and accurate for what's being played on your discs, on Netflix, whatever it is. When you have a soundbar, there's not really a lot of options. You can't play around with the sound. You can't control how much bass you do or don't want, or control that dynamic range. And that's the big plus of the surround sound system, is getting that dynamic range, those crazy differences from the highs to the lows. And if you don't like them, right? If you don't want the dynamic range, so you've got kids sleeping, your wife sleeping, your boyfriend, whatever, somebody is in another room, you have neighbors to worry about upstairs, downstairs, you can actually control that dynamic range. You can't control it with a sound bar. So even though your system might be capable of highs and lows, or lows and highs up to here, you can compress that and make it something more manageable. That's something you can do with a receiver that you can't on the soundbar. And that's a feature that a lot of people do use. I don't ever worry about it. I love to have that full dynamic range, and getting into a house from my old apartment, that was something I was really looking forward to. I never got any complaints at the apartment, but getting to unleash a system in a house is just a really awesome experience. Now, speakers do typically have a bigger footprint than the soundbar. You've got 2 to 5 of them. You have to figure out where you're gonna put them. But you do have a lot more flexibility with where you can place those speakers throughout your room. And if we're looking at the pros and cons here of the soundbar versus the dedicated sound system, I mean, it's almost without saying, of course the sound system is gonna win out, but I think the soundbar is awesome if you don't have room for any of the speakers. Although I do think with the flexibility, anybody can make it happen in any space that you've got. But if you don't want to go that extra mile, go with a soundbar, please. Don't do that to yourself. Don't do that to your ears. Don't use the onboard TV speakers, because the soundbar is still going to blow those away. Right, the rest of these points I think that we can actually kind of breeze through. And moving on to number 2, what surround format are you going to be using, right? Decide on that. 2.1, 3.1, 5.1, do you want Atmos? Again, that's back to the flexibility of what you can do with the surround sound. And keep in mind, when you're going and you're buying these speakers, your left, center, and right channel, these are the most important. And you do want to try and match them. If you only start out with the left and right, when you later go to get a center, make sure you get one that's going to timbre match with that. So you maybe want to get it from the same exact product line. But deciding on what format you're going to use is important. In my living room right here, this is just a 3.1 system, so left, center, right, and the one subwoofer. In this living room, I can't really make a complete surround sound work. I think I could maybe get creative with it. It wouldn't be ideal, but when you're going for any of these formats in a living room, you do have to get creative. You might have to make compromises on what the standard is set by THX or Dolby, whatever it is. If you have to move your two surrounds back farther apart, say they aren't symmetrical, that's okay. As long as your left, center, and right are in pretty ideal positions, you can compromise in other ways. And that's exactly what I did in my old apartment. So figure out what sound format you want to get, whether that's starting out with 2.0 or going to a 3.1, which I think is very popular for most living room systems, but that's going to be great for all your movies, and it's going to be awesome for your music as well. And then moving on to our next point, make a budget, right? Create a budget and stick with it. If you're getting into this hobby, the first system that you're building, it does not have to be end game level. This doesn't have to be the system that you're going to stick with for 10, 20, 30 years, right? Because speaker technology hasn't changed a whole lot over time. We've created different sound formats, different ways of mastering, but the speakers themselves, they haven't changed a whole lot. So this is a hobby, you've got to remember that, and we got to start somewhere, right? In my home theater back in my apartment, I started out with a dinky little Yamaha home theater in a box. And I think that system cost me $330 total, right? I got all 5 speakers and this dinky little subwoofer for $130 on sale on Amazon. I've since replaced all of the Yamaha speakers, but I actually still have the subwoofer, although I'm looking to upgrade that, right? And that's part of the modular ability of these systems, and that's something I love. But if you don't have to spend $1,000, $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 on these systems, right? You can do it for cheap, and even I think the smaller end, lower end home theater systems, like those home theater in a boxes, they're still an upgrade even from Soundbars, because you can create a wider sound stage, and paired with a good subwoofer, you're still going to get that incredible dynamic range. Also, look for deals online. Go to eBay, look for Black Friday deals. I think I built both of my systems on a Black Friday deal for Best Buy. Don't be afraid to go entry level, right? That's a step above home theater in a box. While I think that's where a lot of us start out on accident, is going through a cheap home theater in a box system. Look at entry level, go to Best Buy. These speakers here, this is my Sony Core series. I've been using them for 5 years now. I really love them. So if you go to Best Buy, they've got Klipsch out there, Polks, Sonys. These are speakers that are gonna be like, $50 to $130 each. That's not crazy. It's well within most people's budgets who are looking to build a home theater, and they're good enough for most living rooms, right? And that's a great place to start at. Now, spend evenly and spend smartly. And what I mean by that is, don't spend $500 on all of your speakers, right? Or $1,000 on your speakers, and then only shell out $100 to $200 for a little subwoofer, because you're going to neuter your system, you're going to bottleneck it. That's not going to be any good. It's not what you want to do. That's one thing, is save some money and budget and look into subwoofers. I'll probably do a different buying guide for subwoofers, but that thing can save even a less than great system. If you've got a quality subwoofer to handle all the lower end work, it's going to take everything to the next level. So spend money accordingly, and don't cheap out on the subwoofer. Really, that's a tip in itself. Don't cheap out on the subwoofer. And tip number 4, be very cognizant of the content that you're going to be using, right? Are you going to be streaming? Do you have a physical media collection, Blu-ray, 4Ks? Or also, are you doing this for gaming? Surround sound gaming is just a whole other ballpark. I did do a lot of gaming in my living room, in the apartment, and doing it out here. Surround sound for movies is one thing. Surround sound in gaming gets far more use out of it. It's incredibly immersive. So just be aware of what content you're going to be putting through your system, whether that's Blu-rays or 4Ks, and what streaming device you're going to be using, whether that's an NVIDIA Shield or the Amazon stick or the box, the Apple 4K TV, whatever it may be. and you're going to be using that as your main viewing device hooked up to your receiver. You know, do you really need to spend $10,000 on a speaker system if you're playing audio through streaming? Probably not. So just spend accordingly and just be considerate of what content you're going to be watching. And last but not least, consider the space that you're going to be using and who you share it with, right? I was pretty fortunate in my last setup that I could really go all out with the decorations. I was sharing my apartment with my fiance, but most people in a living room setup, think of this is your living room in a home. You've got children, you've got pets to worry about. Pets are a big thing. Cats can destroy speakers, dogs can destroy speakers. You need to be considerate of the budget and the money that you're putting into these things, and will they be getting bumped? If this thing gets bumped, are you gonna really worry about it falling down to the ground? But that is something to consider, you know, is who you're sharing this space with. And it's kind of funny, there's something in the community called the wife approval factor or the spouse approval factor. And what that means is, you know, there's gear that looks phenomenal to us, right, in the hobby. It might look awesome, but your wife or your spouse, your husband, whoever it is, maybe they don't like it. Maybe they think it's distracting and obtrusive. A lot of people like to take their speaker grills off. Some people love to see those cones and tweeters, the copper on the clips. People like to see them, but something that helps tone down or really bring up the spouse approval factor is keeping things covered. Make sure it can be integrated, and be aware of the design of your space, your living room, that it can be hidden and kind of low key. Right guys, so this was a lot of fun getting to break down just some home theater tips, going over the audio, the video, talking about surround sound. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Be sure to comment down below. What did you think about this? Are you going to be going for a soundbar or going for a home theater setup? I really want to know. Let's get a discussion going down below. And I do plan on breaking down some of these topics in separate videos, but this has been a blast getting to talk about home theater in general. Be sure to subscribe again for movie news, reviews, home theater, steelbooks, Blu-rays, all that good stuff. I'll see you guys on the next video.